We'd like to welcome you. Thank you very much for coming to the annual Minority Caucus press conference. On the eve of the final floor debate for the final O'Malley-Brown budget, we'd like to once again give the Democrat majority an opportunity to choose a path of fiscal responsibility and pass a responsible budget, something that we don't believe they've done for the last 8 years. Over the last 8 years, the budget has increased by more than $10.6 billion. That's 37%. And we know that Maryland families, and especially Maryland senior citizens on a fixed income, have not seen these kind of increases in their budgets. As the minority party, we could very easily just vote against this budget, but we are not the party of no. We are the party of solutions. We are the party of better ideas. We are the party of responsible fiscal plans, and we are called to point out where things have gone wrong and show that there is a better way to handle Maryland finances. The House Republican Caucus has a long history of presenting an alternative budget plan each and every year to improve Maryland's long-standing fiscal position and to give the citizens of Maryland an opportunity to have a different choice. Right now, I'd like to introduce to you Delegate Jeannie Hadaway.
As I travel across the state and I talk to citizens and I try to explain this year's budget, I find it very hard to explain to them that after all the tax and fee increases, after $2 billion more in spending, we still have a state deficit in our budget. They ask all the time, how is that even possible? And there's only one answer. It's a lack of leadership and mismanagement at the top. This is a huge I told you so moment for our caucus. For years we've been offering alternative plans and alternative budgets, and if any one of them had been adopted, we wouldn't be in the fiscal mess that we find ourselves in today. This is the last of the O'Malley-Brown administration, and they had an opportunity to leave a legacy for Maryland. But instead, they've left a trail of broken promises, increased debt, and an unsecured future. That is hardly moving Maryland forward. This budget is nothing more than an election year budget, and that's demonstrated by the spending. It's selfish and it's a disservice to the citizens of Maryland. It's time for better solutions, and it's time for better leadership in Annapolis.
Good afternoon. Repeatedly under the course of the O'Malley-Brown budgets, we have seen a variety of what you call one-time fixes that seem to become permanent. These accounting gimmicks that not only rob Peter to pay Paul, but then rob Paul to pay Peter back, and then start the cycle again. It's a dangerous game of budget roulette. These budgets have been filled with short-term fixes that have long-term consequences, continuously kicking the can down the road. But for Maryland, Maryland is about to run out of road, and the can is filled with concrete. We have robbed special funds set aside for special purposes, and then borrowed money to pay for projects, like a family paying their mortgage with their credit card. We have all but eliminated the decades-long program that sent gas tax money back to local governments for the purposes of fixing roads and maintaining and fixing potholes, devastating county and municipal budgets. Now that the gas tax has been increased, that money still is not flowing back to our local governments. One of the worst short-term fixes with the worst long-term consequence is what they're doing with the budget, or through the pension. In 2011, the legislature decided to fix the years of the Glendenning misuse of the pension, and the fix was put in, and yet here we are 3 years into it, and we haven't even made the first payment. We have defaulted on this. So 3 years later, they've refused to keep their side of the deal. Now I'd like to introduce Delegate Steve Ahrens from Queen Anne's County.
Good afternoon. As someone who's rather new to the General Assembly, I'm really quite shocked at the number of taxes, tolls, and fees that have been increased over the last 8 years. New taxes, increased taxes, higher tolls, new fees, increased fees. 83 of them as it actually stands. How much more can the people of Maryland take? I don't even think the members on the other side of the aisle actually realize how many there are. Year to year, we make these decisions, And these things stack up and they pile up, and the cumulative weight on you people is crushing. Comptroller Francho said, recognized this fact in a recent statement regarding the revenue write-downs earlier this month. He said, we must recognize that in order to invest in the things that we truly need, we'll have to forgo many of the things we simply want. We simply cannot take any more money out of the pockets of the consumers. This budget, as it currently stands, continues this cycle of overspending and taxing. And while there's no new taxes in the budget, the continuous overspending just opens the door for new taxes in the future. And it's something I just cannot support. I'd like to introduce to you Delegate Andy Serafini from Washington County. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It's very interesting. If we continue down this fiscal path, what will happen? This consistent overspending and one-time fixes, we will be left with only two choices. One would be to cut programs, and the others would be to continue to raise taxes. As we look at this budget, we have to ask what major programs can be cut, or what taxes are we willing to raise again, because we cannot exercise fiscal discipline today. It's interesting that USA Today in March reported that 28 states are now operating with a surplus. Imagine that. These states held fast during budget times that were difficult, and now that hard work is paying off. They don't have to rob employee pensions or steal from other dedicated funds. Some are even able to return money back to the taxpayers. This shouldn't be a Republican or Democratic issue. If you look to California, Governor Jerry Brown on Meet the Press recently said, no matter how liberal you want to be, at the end of the day, fiscal discipline is the fundamental predicate of a free society. But we have a very different story here in Maryland. The path chosen has not worked. Sage policy economist Arnaban Basu recently commented that choices made in Maryland over the last 7 years will lead to deep difficulties for years to come. In some respects, you'd almost have to feel sorry for whomever is unfortunate enough to win the gubernatorial election. They will be left with significant challenges and no good options. Our citizens will either pay dearly to maintain the current level of benefits, or they'll have to give up more and more of their hard-earned dollars because of these poor choices in the past. You know, I was trying to think of a good analogy of what happens in life sometimes, where because of some poor decisions you end up paying for it for years and years and years. Unfortunately, in divorce sometimes you have alimony, and that means that because of an unfortunate situation, you're going to have to pay for years and years and years. And when I consider what's going to happen, it seems like the citizens of Maryland are going to be paying alimony for a very long time. With that, I'd like to introduce Delegate Tony McConkey from Anne Arundel County.
Poor decisions have placed our state on a fiscal cliff. The 2015 O'Malley Brown budget is more of the same, less a vision for the future than an effort to make do until the governor can get out of town. The shaky assumptions that are the basis of the budget are now being revealed. Since its introduction, revenues have been written down by $238 million. Obamacare has racked up an additional $63 million in deficiencies, and the General Assembly has found it necessary to double down on the theft of pensions from $100 million to $200 million. It is amazing that after 80 new taxes and fees in the last 7 years, that the governor and the legislature has used pension money to balance the budget. This is leaving Maryland with a devastating fiscal cliff starting in 2016. Just next year, debt service, pension payments will ramp up dramatically because of our irresponsibility now. Our Republican alternative budget is reasonable and responsible. Our proposal would simply limit growth in the general fund to 1% over the 2014 budget. By limiting growth to 1%, we could keep state promises and fully fund pensions. We could increase spending for priority items. But we would still have a $186 million fund balance that we could use as a cushion to deal with additional Obamacare deficiencies and for the ramp up in expenses over the next year. that $186 million cushion is much more responsible than we feel the Democrat alternative. Our alternative budget protects the promises of our state, allowing some growth, but fully funds pensions and reduces the fiscal cliff facing Maryland.
As you can see, once again this year, we have a responsible plan and a responsible path for Maryland to take. We have better ideas and better solutions, positioning Maryland to be fiscally responsible into the future. And with that, we'll take a few questions from